Cottonwood, Oregon, mid-December 1875. Ella Sullivan pushed open her cabin door at dawn and froze. A man lay crumpled against her porch railing, blood soaking through his coat, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The first blizzard of winter howled across the wind-scoured prairie, and this stranger was dying on her doorstep. Ella was an Army widow, 29 years old, dark auburn hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, gray eyes sharp from 3 years of running her homestead alone after her husband fell at Little Bighorn. She had learned to trust no one and depend on herself, but leaving a man to freeze went against everything decent. She crouched beside him, her worn wool coat pulled tight against the bitter cold. His face was pale, under days of stubble, dark brown hair, matted with sweat. But his features were strong, handsome, even through the pain. He looked mid-30s, tall and lean, dressed in the practical clothes of someone who traveled rough country. She pressed her hand to the wound in his side and felt warm blood.
You picked a hell of a place to die, mister.
She hooked her arms under his shoulders and dragged him inside, grunting with effort. He was heavy, dead weight, but she had hauled fence posts and feed sacks for years. She kicked the door shut against the storm and lowered him onto the braided rug near her stove. His eyes fluttered open, pale blue and feverish.
Sorry, ma'am. Didn't mean to trouble you.
Save your breath. Let me see that wound.
She cut away his shirt with her sewing scissors and sucked in a breath. A deep gash ran along his ribs, clean-edged like a knife had opened him up. Not a gunshot, not an animal. Someone had tried to kill him. She fetched water, clean rags, and the whiskey she kept for emergencies.
This is going to hurt.
She poured whiskey into the wound, and he arched off the floor with a choked gasp, but didn't scream. Tough man. She stitched him with steady hands, the same way she mended torn harnesses, and wrapped his ribs tight. When she finished, his eyes were clearer.
Thank you. I'm Ben Sullivan, frontier doctor out of Pendleton. Was riding through when someone jumped me on the road 2 miles back.
Ella Sullivan. Army widow. You have a name for the man who cut you?
Didn't see his face, but I heard him say Caldwell sent him.
Ella went still. Garrick Caldwell. Everyone in Cottonwood knew that name, and most wished they didn't. He ran the toll bridge over Crooked Creek, the only crossing for 20 miles. And he had turned extortion into an art. Travelers paid double if they argued, triple if they looked prosperous. And if you couldn't pay, he took your wagon, your horse, or worse. Lately, he had been buying up properties around town, always at rock-bottom prices after the owners mysteriously found themselves desperate. Rumor said he was planning something big, something that would finish Cottonwood before winter locked the pass.
Caldwell is dangerous. If he wants you dead, you need to leave as soon as you can ride.
Can't leave. I came here for a reason. A banker in Pendleton told me Caldwell is using forged loan documents to steal properties. He is selling the whole town to outside investors before the snow traps everyone here. I am the only one who knows the banker's weakness. I have proof he can testify against Caldwell.
What proof?
A lost recipe book. Belonged to a woman named Margaret Lawson. She died 6 months ago and left it to her daughter, but it went missing from the estate. Inside are coded messages that prove Caldwell forged the banker's signature on loan papers all over the county. The banker hid the truth in plain sight because Caldwell threatened his family. If I find that book, I can end this.
Ella stood and paced to the window. Snow blew sideways across her small homestead, piling against the barn, burying the fence line. The blizzard had arrived early and hard, just like the warning said. She thought of her neighbors, good people barely scraping by, all of them in debt to the bank, all of them at risk if Caldwell called in those loans. She thought of old Henry Marks, who had lost his general store last month when Caldwell bought his note and demanded immediate payment. She thought of the Simpson family, 4 kids under 10, evicted from their homestead 2 weeks ago, because they couldn't prove the deed was legitimate. Caldwell was a bully and a thief, but he was also smart and ruthless. If Ben Sullivan had real proof, it might be the only chance to stop him.
That recipe book. Margaret's daughter is Jenny Lawson. She works at the hotel kitchen in town. If the book is anywhere, she might know.
We need to get to her before Caldwell realizes I am still alive. He will come looking.
You can barely stand. And that storm is getting worse.
Then we go now while he thinks I am dead in a ditch somewhere.
Ella turned and studied him. He met her eyes with a steady gaze. No fear, just determination. She recognized that look. Her husband had worn it the day he left for his last patrol. The look of a man who knew the cost and paid it anyway. She made her decision.
Get up. We saddle the horses and ride to town. But if you fall off and die, I am not dragging your corpse back here.
Fair enough.
She helped him into one of her late husband's old coats, thick wool lined with fur, and bundled herself in layers. Outside, the wind hit like a fist. She led her 2 horses from the barn, a sturdy mare named Dust and an older gelding named Captain. Ben climbed into Captain's saddle with a grimace, one hand pressed to his side. Ella swung onto Dust and turned toward the road. The ride to Cottonwood took 30 minutes in good weather. Today, it might take an hour, maybe more. Snow blinded them within minutes. Ella rode by instinct, following the faint line of fence posts that marked the road. Ben stayed close, hunched against the wind. Halfway to town, Ella spotted movement ahead. 3 riders emerged from the white curtain, moving fast. She recognized the led horse, a big black stallion with a white blaze. Caldwell's horse.
Company.
Can we outrun them?
Not in this storm.
Ella pulled Dust off the road into a cluster of bare cottonwoods, and Ben followed. They dismounted and crouched behind the trees, holding the horses quiet. The riders passed within 20 yards. Caldwell in the lead, his face hidden by a scarf but his build unmistakable, thick and broad like a bull. 2 men flanked him, both armed with rifles. They rode toward Ella's homestead.
He is checking to see if I made it to shelter.
He will find tracks. We need to move fast.
They remounted and pushed toward town, keeping off the main road. When they reached Cottonwood's edge, the storm had turned the streets into a ghost town. Snow buried hitching posts and drifted against storefronts. The hotel sat at the far end of the main street, a 2-story building with a sagging porch. Ella and Ben tied their horses behind the building and slipped in through the kitchen door. Jenny Lawson stood at a big iron stove, stirring a pot of stew. She was young, maybe 22, with pale blonde hair and tired eyes. She jumped when they entered. "Jenny, it is Ella Sullivan. We need your help." Jenny glanced at Ben, then back to Ella, wary. "This is Ben Sullivan, a doctor from Pendleton. He is looking for your mother's recipe book, the one that went missing." Jenny's face went pale. I don't have it. It disappeared the day after the funeral. I thought someone stole it. Ben stepped forward, his voice low and urgent.
That book has coded messages inside. Messages that prove Garrett Caldwell forged loan documents. If we find it, we can stop him from stealing this town.
Jenny looked between them, fear and hope warring in her expression. I hid it. After Mama died, a man came asking about her things. He scared me. So I took the book and hid it in the one place no one would look. The church bell tower.
Show us.
They followed Jenny out the back and across the street to the small whitewashed church. The bell tower rose above the single-room sanctuary, accessible by a narrow ladder inside. Snow had drifted against the church door, and they had to force it open. Inside was dim and cold, the pews empty. Jenny climbed the ladder first, then Ella, then Ben, moving slow and careful with his injury. The bell tower was cramped, open to the wind on all sides, the big iron bell hanging silent in the center. Jenny reached into a gap between two wooden beams and pulled out a small leather-bound book, its cover worn and stained. Jenny handed it to Ella, and Ella opened it carefully. The pages were filled with handwritten recipes, neat, careful script, instructions for bread and stew and pie. But in the margins, in a different ink, were strings of numbers and letters. Codes. Ben leaned over her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck, and studied the pages.
This is it. These numbers match loan document serial numbers, and these letters are initials. She was tracking every forged loan Caldwell made.
How do we prove it?
We need the banker to testify. His name is Howard Pierce. He lives in Pendleton, but he has family here in Cottonwood. His sister runs the boarding house on 2nd Street. If we can get to him before Caldwell does, we can force him to talk.
A shout echoed from the street below. Ella moved to the tower opening and looked down. Caldwell and his 2 men had dismounted in front of the church. One of them pointed at the fresh tracks in the snow leading to the door.
They found us.
Is there another way down?
Jenny shook her head, eyes wide with terror. Only the ladder. Ella tucked the recipe book inside her coat and drew the old revolver she kept in her belt. Her husband's gun, a Colt Army model, 6 shots, well maintained. Ben pulled a small Derringer from his boot. 2 shots, close range only. Jenny had nothing.
Jenny, stay behind us. Ben, can you shoot?
Well enough.
The church door slammed open below. Heavy boots on the wooden floor. Caldwell's voice boomed up through the rafters, rough and mocking. Come on down, Doctor, and bring the widow with you. I just want to talk. Ella didn't answer. She positioned herself at the top of the ladder, revolver aimed down. Ben moved to the opposite side of the tower, covering the other angle. Jenny crouched behind the bell, shaking. Caldwell laughed. You think you can hide up there? I will burn this whole church down if I have to. That book belongs to me.
The book proves you are a thief and a fraud, Caldwell. It is over.
A gunshot cracked and wood splintered near Ella's head. She ducked back, heart hammering. Another shot, then another. They were firing blind up through the tower floor, trying to flush them out.
We can't stay here.
The bell. If we ring it, the town will hear. Someone might come.
Ella nodded. She grabbed the bell rope and pulled hard. The iron bell swung and tolled, deep and loud, echoing across the snowed-in town. She rang it again and again, the sound cutting through the storm. Below, Caldwell cursed and shouted orders. Boots pounded up the ladder. Ella aimed down and fired. The shot went wide in the cramped space, but the man on the ladder yelped and dropped back down. She fired again, keeping them pinned. Ben moved to the ladder and fired his Derringer, both shots fast and sharp. Someone screamed.
Got one.
But the reprieve was brief. Caldwell bellowed, and a new sound reached them, the crackle of flames. Smoke began to curl up through the floorboards.
He is burning us out.
We jump. It is the only way.
That is a 20-foot drop onto frozen ground.
Better than burning.
Ella looked at Jenny, then at Ben, then down at the growing flames. She made the call.
Jenny first. Ben, help her.
Ben guided Jenny to the tower, opening on the side away from the fire. He held her hands and lowered her as far as he could, then let go. She dropped and hit the snow hard, but rolled and got up, limping, but alive. Ella went next. Ben gripped her wrists, and she dangled in the air for a heartbeat before he released her. She fell fast, tucked and rolled, and came up on her knees in the snow, the recipe book still safe inside her coat. Ben came last. He hung from the tower edge, his face tight with pain, and dropped. He landed badly, his wounded side taking the impact, and collapsed with a grunt. Ella scrambled to him.
Can you move?
Have to.
She hauled him up, and Jenny supported his other side. They stumbled away from the church as flames licked up the walls and smoke poured from the tower. The bell tolled one last time, then went silent. Figures moved in the smoke. Caldwell and his men, coughing and cursing. But more figures appeared from the other direction. Townspeople, drawn by the bell. Henry Marks with a shotgun. The Simpson father with a pickaxe. A dozen others, men and women, armed with whatever they could grab. They surrounded the burning church, blocking Caldwell's escape. Henry stepped forward, his old face hard. That is enough, Caldwell. You burned the house of God. You threatened decent people. It ends now. Caldwell spat in the snow. You old fool. You have no proof of anything.
We have proof.
Ella pulled the recipe book from her coat and held it up.
Margaret Lawson documented every forged loan you made, every crooked deal, every family you threatened. And we have the banker who will testify to save his own neck.
Caldwell's face went red with rage. He lunged forward, but Henry's shotgun swung up, and the crowd closed in. Two men grabbed Caldwell and wrestled him to the ground. His men threw down their weapons and backed away, hands raised. It was over in seconds. The sheriff arrived minutes later, wading through the snow, and took Caldwell into custody. The church burned down to its foundation, but no one died. Ella sat on the boarding house steps with Ben, both of them exhausted and smoke-stained. Jenny brought them coffee and blankets. The storm was easing, the wind dying down, the snow falling softer now.
You saved this town.
We saved it.
I couldn't have done it without you.
Ella looked at him. This stranger who had collapsed on her porch at dawn, who had bled on her floor and trusted her with his life. His pale blue eyes met hers, and something shifted in her chest. Something she thought had died with her husband at Little Bighorn. She had been alone so long, locked in grief and self-reliance. But here was a man who saw her strength and didn't flinch from it. A man who matched her step for step.
What will you do now? Go back to Pendleton?
I don't know. Pendleton is just a place. I have been riding from town to town for years, never staying long, never finding a reason to stay.
Maybe you need a reason.
Maybe I just found one.
He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, their fingers lacing together, warm despite the cold.
Ella Sullivan. Would you let a fool frontier doctor court you proper?
I might. If he promises not to get himself stabbed again.
I will do my best.
She smiled. A real smile. The first in years.
Then I suppose you can stay. My barn needs a new roof before the next storm, and I could use someone who knows which end of a hammer to hold.
I think I can manage that.
The days that followed were a blur of recovery and revelation. Howard Pierce, the banker, arrived in Cottonwood under escort and testified before the territorial judge. Margaret Lawson's recipe book was entered as evidence, and the codes inside were cracked by a clerk from Pendleton who had a knack for ciphers. Caldwell's entire operation unraveled. Forged loans were voided, properties returned, families restored. Caldwell himself was sentenced to 10 years hard labor. His bridge was seized by the county, and the tolls reduced to fair rates. Cottonwood began to breathe again. Ella and Ben worked side by side through the aftermath, helping neighbors rebuild, settling accounts, making sure justice reached everyone Caldwell had wronged. Ben moved into the small room above Ella's barn, respectful of her space. But he took his meals at her table, and they talked long into the evenings. He told her about his years riding the frontier, delivering babies and setting bones, and fighting fever in remote cabins. She told him about her marriage, about the man she had loved and lost, about the grief that had hardened her. He listened without judgment, and she found herself softening, letting him in. By the time the snows began to melt in late December, they were inseparable. He rode with her to check fences, and she helped him organize his medical supplies. They worked in easy silence, the kind of companionship that came from shared struggle and mutual respect. On Christmas Eve, Ben saddled Captain and rode into town. He returned at dusk with a small box in his coat pocket. Ella met him at the barn, brushing down dust after her own ride.
Ella, I need to ask you something.
He pulled the box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple gold band. No stones, just smooth, warm metal.
I know it has only been 2 weeks. I know you have every reason to say no, but I have never met anyone like you. You are strong and brave, and you don't need me, and that is exactly why I want to be with you. Not because you need saving, but because I want to stand beside you. Will you marry me?
Ella stared at the ring, her throat tight. Every logical part of her said it was too fast, too reckless. But her heart, the part she had locked away for 3 years, said something different.
Yes.
Yes? She and the warned Rundant Rekthing, one souter said, they were place at the time. The warn the wind stus but that we year in luch coims. Or yes, with a lost lots mark Pogan. Yes, the waist bone frest in the teaching 9 ties. The head had barred fire. They called it fire. The wind finally was pay for a Christ it's walking.
Yes, you fool. Yes, I will marry you.
He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, soft and careful, and she kissed him back, fierce and certain. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling like idiots.
When?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow? I seen the warned Rundant Reckling. Once out of said, there were place at the time. Tomorrow gan stress with that Fieren Luch coins. I were they love, with a lost law and spark. A singular stress, and to the waist to bowing freached in the teaching dining ties. The head had part from higher. I called it tire, but my finally was pay for a Christ it's walking.
Why wait? The pass will be locked soon, and I don't want to spend another winter alone.
Tomorrow. It is.
They told the town that night, and by morning half of Cottonwood had gathered at the rebuilt church site. Now just a cleared patch of ground with a wooden cross. The circuit preacher happened to be in town, delayed by the storm, and he agreed to perform the ceremony. Ella wore her best dress, dark blue wool with lace at the collar, her hair pinned up with her mother's old combs. Ben wore a clean shirt and his only good coat. They stood in the snow holding hands while the preacher spoke the words. Henry Marks and Jenny Lawson stood as witnesses. The Simpson children threw handfuls of snow like rice. When the preacher said they could kiss, Ben pulled Ella close and kissed her in front of everyone, and she didn't care who saw. The reception was held in the hotel dining room, simple food and hot coffee. But the warmth came from the people, from the community that had nearly been torn apart and had chosen to stand together. Ella and Ben danced to a fiddle tune, clumsy and laughing, and when the sun began to set, they slipped away. They rode back to the homestead together, the snow crunching under the horses' hooves, the sky turning pink and gold. At the barn, they unsaddled the horses and put them away for the night. Ben leaned against the barn door, looking out at the prairie, the wind gentle now. The storm long past. Ella stood beside him, her hand in his.
This is home now.
This is home.
Snow began to fall again, soft and slow, dusting their shoulders and hair. They stood together in the barn doorway, watching the flakes drift down, and decided without words that tomorrow they would start building their life together. But tonight, they would simply stand here and be grateful. Ella looked up at Ben and saw her future in his eyes, and for the first time since her husband's death, she believed in that future.
What do you want to do first? Fix the roof or plant the spring garden?
Neither. First we eat supper and sit by the fire, and I tell you all the ridiculous things my neighbors will expect from the town doctor.
Town doctor. I like the sound of that.
Good. Because Henry already told everyone you are staying, and now you are stuck.
I can think of worse places to be stuck.
They walked back to the cabin together, the warmth of the stove waiting inside. The future unfolding, one day at a time. The threat was gone, the town was healing, and Ella Sullivan had found something she thought she had lost forever. Not just love, but partnership. Not just survival, but a reason to thrive. As they stepped inside and closed the door against the snow, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The end of one hard season, and the beginning of something better. Simple and soon, just like they decided. Tomorrow morning, they would wake as husband and wife, and that was all the certainty they needed. The winter deepened, and Cottonwood settled into a rhythm of recovery and rebuilding. Ben established his practice in a small room behind the general store, treating frostbite and winter fever, and the occasional broken bone from ice falls. Ella kept the homestead running, feeding stock and mending fences and keeping the cabin warm. They worked separate but together, meeting each night at the supper table to share the day's stories. Word spread fast that the town had a real doctor now, and soon Ben was riding out to neighboring homesteads, sometimes gone for days when a difficult birth or a bad injury required constant care. Ella never complained when he left, just packed his saddlebags with food and clean bandages and kissed him goodbye at the barn door. She trusted him to come back, and he always did. In January, a freighter brought news that the territorial marshal had raided Caldwell's old warehouse in Pendleton and found crates of forged documents, deeds, and loan papers for a dozen towns across Oregon. The scandal reached all the way to Salem and triggered a reform of the land office. Margaret Lawson received a formal commendation and a cash reward for her code work, which she used to expand the hotel. Howard Pierce retired from banking and moved to California, his reputation ruined, but his conscience finally clear. Cottonwood began to thrive in ways it hadn't in years. The Simpson family reopened their feed store with legitimate credit. Henry Marks hired 2 deputies and restored order to the county. The church was rebuilt by spring, a simple white structure with a bell tower and stained glass windows, donated by grateful families. Ella and Ben attended every Sunday, sitting in the back pew holding hands like newlyweds. By February, Ben had saved enough to buy a proper medical bag from a catalog in Portland, leather with brass fittings and compartments for instruments and vials. Ella surprised him with a custom saddle blanket Jenny had embroidered with his initials. They celebrated their 2-month anniversary with a quiet dinner at the hotel. And when they returned to the homestead that night, Ben pulled Ella close in the barn and told her he wanted to build a real house, something bigger than the cabin, with a room for his practice and space for the family they both wanted someday. Ella agreed, and they spent the next week sketching plans on scraps of paper, arguing cheerfully over window placement and porch size. In March, the pass opened and travelers began moving through Cottonwood again, no longer forced to pay extortion tolls. The bridge keeper hired by the county was an honest man named Thomas Gray, who charged fair rates and kept the bridge in good repair. Trade increased, and the town prospered. Ben's practice grew busier, and Ella hired a neighbor boy to help with the heavier barn work so she could spend more time in town helping Margaret with the hotel accounts. The 2 women became close friends, bonding over shared losses and newfound hope. One cold evening in late March, Ben came home from a long day of house calls to find Ella sitting by the fire with a strange look on her face.
What is wrong? Are you sick?
No. Not sick. I think I might be pregnant.
Ben stared at her, then crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms.
Are you sure?
Not certain yet. But I know my body, and something feels different.
This is wonderful. This is the best news.
You are not worried? We have only been married 3 months.
I am not worried. I am grateful.
He kissed her forehead and held her close, and Ella felt the last of her old fears dissolve. She had been so afraid for so long, afraid to trust, afraid to hope, afraid to let anyone in. But here was a man who had walked into her life wounded and desperate, and had stayed to build something real. A partner, a husband, a father for the child growing inside her. In April, Ella's pregnancy was confirmed by Ben's careful examination and the telltale signs she could no longer ignore. The news spread through town like wildfire, and suddenly everyone had advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and offers to help. Jenny knitted tiny booties. Margaret organized a quilting circle. Henry Marks carved a wooden cradle from oak and delivered it to the homestead with a gruff congratulations. The community that had nearly been destroyed by Caldwell's greed now rallied around the young couple who had risked everything to save it. By May, the foundation for the new house was poured and framing began. Ben worked alongside hired carpenters when he wasn't on calls, sawing and hammering and lifting beams. Ella supervised from a chair in the shade, her belly beginning to show, sketching curtain patterns and arguing good-naturedly about paint colors. The cabin would remain as a guest house and storage, but the new house would be their real home, built with their own hands and filled with their own future. One warm evening in late May, as the sun set over the prairie and the new house stood half-finished against the sky, Ella and Ben walked out to the barn together to check on the horses. Dust and Captain were sleek and healthy, no longer the exhausted mounts that had carried them through that desperate December storm. Ella rubbed Dust's nose and smiled.
Do you ever think about that morning, when you collapsed on my porch?
Every day. I think about how close I came to dying in the snow, and how lucky I was that you found me.
I think about how close I came to turning you away. I almost did. You know. I almost told you to keep writing.
But you did not.
No. I did not. And that changed everything.
She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, careful of her growing belly. They stood like that for a long time, listening to the horses munch hay and the wind whisper through the prairie grass. The threat was long gone. The town was whole, and their life together was just beginning. Simple and sure, built on trust and hard work, and the kind of love that came from choosing each other every single day.
What do you want to name the baby?
If it is a girl, I want to name her Hope.
And if it is a boy?
Thomas. After your father.
He would have liked that.
They walked back to the cabin, hand in hand, the sky turning pink and gold above them, the future unfolding one step at a time. Ella Sullivan had survived loss and grief and danger, had fought a corrupt system and won, had opened her heart to a wounded stranger and found a partner worth keeping. And now, as spring turned to summer and the new house rose from the prairie, she knew that the best part of her story was still being written, not with grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but with quiet mornings and shared work, and the steady, unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. With the man she loved, in the place they had chosen together, building a life that was wholly and completely their own. By June, the new house was complete, 2 stories with wide windows that faced the sunrise and a wraparound porch that caught the evening breeze. Ben hung a shingle outside that read Dr. Benjamin Sullivan, and within a week, his waiting room was full of patients who preferred the comfort of a proper office to the cramped back room at the general store. Ella painted the kitchen walls a soft yellow and hung curtains she had sewn herself, white cotton with tiny blue flowers. The cradle Henry had carved sat in the corner of their bedroom, waiting. In July, the heat came hard and dry, baking the prairie grass to gold and turning the dirt roads to dust. Ben treated heat stroke and dehydration and helped deliver twins for a family north of town, staying 3 days until both mother and babies were stable. When he returned home exhausted and sunburned, Ella had cold water waiting and a meal on the table and didn't ask questions, just held him while he slept. Her belly had grown round and full, and the baby kicked often, especially at night when she lay down to rest. Ben would press his hand against her stomach and feel the movement, his eyes going soft with wonder.
Strong kicks. This one is going to be a fighter.
Just like the father.
And the mother.
In August, Margaret Lawson hosted a community picnic to celebrate the town's recovery and the upcoming harvest. Tables were set up in the churchyard with food donated by every family: fried chicken and berry pies and fresh bread. Children ran through the grass playing tag, while adults gathered in clusters to talk crops and weather and politics. Ben was pulled into a conversation about setting up a regional medical cooperative, and Ella sat with Jenny and Margaret under the shade of a cottonwood tree, fanning herself and laughing at Jenny's stories about her youngest son's antics. Henry Marks stopped by with a glass of lemonade for Ella and a nod of approval. "You look well, Mrs. Sullivan. Town is lucky to have you both."
Thank you, Henry. We are the lucky ones.
He tipped his hat and moved on, and Margaret leaned over with a knowing smile. That is high praise from Henry. He does not give compliments lightly.
I know. It means something.
As the sun began to set, Ben found Ella and helped her to her feet, his hand steady on her back. They walked home slowly, her movements careful now that she was in her final weeks. The baby was due in early September, and Dr. Callahan from Pendleton had agreed to assist with the delivery, though Ben insisted he could manage on his own if necessary. Ella trusted him completely, but she also knew he would be too nervous to think clearly when it was his own wife and child at risk. They compromised on having Callahan present as backup, and Ben reluctantly agreed. In late August, a telegram arrived at the general store addressed to Ben. It was from a hospital in San Francisco, offering him a position as chief surgeon, a prestigious role with a generous salary and modern facilities. Ben read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. That night after supper, he showed it to Ella without comment. She read it slowly, then looked up at him.
This is a big opportunity.
It is.
Do you want to go?
No. I want to stay here. With you. In this house we built. Treating people who trust me. Raising our child in a place where we have roots.
Are you sure? This is a lot to turn down.
I am sure. I have everything I need right here.
Ella handed the telegram back and smiled, relief flooding through her. She had been prepared to support whatever decision he made, but she had hoped he would choose this. Choose them. Choose Cottonwood.
Then write them back and say no.
Already planning to.
He tossed the telegram into the stove and watched it burn, then pulled Ella close and kissed her temple. The decision was made, and there was no regret, only certainty. On the 1st of September, Ella woke before dawn with a sharp pain in her lower back. She lay still for a moment, breathing through it, then nudged Ben awake.
I think it is time.
Time. Are you sure?
Yes. The contractions started about an hour ago.
Ben was out of bed in an instant, pulling on clothes and lighting lamps, and trying to remember every procedure he had ever studied about childbirth. Ella watched him with a mixture of amusement and affection.
Ben. Breathe. You have done this a dozen times for other women.
Not for my own wife.
I am still just a woman having a baby. Same anatomy. Same process.
You are not just anything.
He sent Henry Marks to fetch Dr. Callahan from Pendleton, then helped Ella into a clean nightgown and settled her in bed with pillows and blankets. contractions were still far apart, but steady. Ben timed them with his pocket watch, his hands shaking slightly. By mid-morning, Callahan arrived, a gray-haired man with calm eyes and steady hands. He examined Ella and nodded approvingly. "You are doing fine, Mrs. Sullivan. Everything looks normal. This will take a while yet, so try to rest between contractions." Ella nodded and gripped Ben's hand as another wave of pain rolled through her. Ben stayed at her side the entire time, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth and murmuring encouragement. The hours stretched on, slow and exhausting. By late afternoon, the contractions were coming hard and fast, and Ella was too tired to speak. Callahan checked her progress and gave Ben a reassuring nod. "Almost there. She is doing beautifully." Ben wanted to believe him, but fear clawed at his chest. He had seen childbirth go wrong too many times, had lost patience despite his best efforts. The thought of losing Ella was unbearable. She must have seen the fear in his eyes, because she reached up and touched his face.
I am not going anywhere. Trust me.
I trust you.
At sunset, Ella gave a final push, and the baby came into the world with a loud, healthy cry. Callahan caught the infant and laid it on Ella's chest, and Ben stared in stunned silence at the tiny, squirming creature covered in blood and vernix. It is a girl. A beautiful, healthy girl. Ella looked down at her daughter and started to cry, exhausted and relieved and overwhelmed with love. Ben leaned over them both, his hand trembling as he touched the baby's tiny fist.
She is perfect.
Hope. Her name is Hope.
Hope Sullivan. I like it.
Callahan finished the delivery and cleaned up while Ben wrapped Hope in a soft blanket and handed her back to Ella. The baby's eyes were dark and unfocused, her face scrunched and red. But to Ben, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He stayed by Ella's side all night, watching over his wife and daughter, unable to sleep for the sheer wonder of it all. By morning, word had spread through town, and visitors began arriving with gifts and congratulations. Jenny brought a basket of food and cooed over the baby. Margaret delivered a quilted blanket she had made herself. Henry Marks stopped by with a gruff nod and a carved wooden rattle. Ben accepted it all with gratitude, but his focus never left Ella and Hope. In the days that followed, Ben and Ella settled into the exhausting rhythm of new parenthood. Hope woke every few hours to nurse, and Ella was constantly tired, but she never complained. Ben did what he could, changing diapers and walking the baby when she fussed, and cooking meals so Ella could rest. His practice took a back seat for a while, and his patients were understanding. Dr. Callahan stayed in town for a week to help with follow-up care and to teach Ben a few tricks for managing infant ailments. By mid-September, life had found a new balance. Ben resumed his rounds, taking shorter trips so he could be home every night. Ella recovered her strength and began teaching Hope to nurse on a schedule. The house was filled with the sounds of a baby crying and cooing, and neither of them would have traded it for anything. One cool evening in late September, as the first hints of autumn touched the air, Ben and Ella sat on the porch together, with Hope sleeping in Ella's arms. The prairie stretched out before them, golden and peaceful, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange.
Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not stopped here that morning?
Sometimes. But not for long. It is too painful to imagine.
I think about it all the time. How close I came to missing this. Missing you. missing her.
But you did not miss it. You are here. We are here. That is all that matters.
You are right.
He leaned over and kissed Ella's forehead, then gently touched Hope's cheek. The baby stirred, but did not wake. They sat like that for a long time, watching the sun sink below the horizon, the future stretching out before them, full of possibility and promise. Ella Sullivan had faced grief and danger, and had come through it stronger. She had opened her heart to a wounded stranger, and found a partner, a husband, a father for her child. And now, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, she knew that her story was not about survival anymore. It was about living, fully and joyfully, in the life she had chosen. With the man she loved, in the home they had built, raising a daughter who would grow up knowing she was wanted and cherished. The end of one chapter and the beginning of the next. Simple, sure, and filled with hope. Army widow finds wounded doctor on her porch and saves her town. In 1875, Cottonwood, Oregon, Army widow Ella Sullivan discovers a wounded frontier doctor named Ben on her porch at dawn. As a blizzard closes in and a corrupt banker threatens to steal the town with forged paperwork, Ella and Ben must decode a mysterious recipe book and expose the villain before the first snow locks the pass. A thrilling Wild West romance filled with danger, resilience, and a beautiful happy ending. Subscribe for more historical romance stories. Wild West romance, frontier love story, historical romance, 1875 Oregon, Army widow, frontier doctor, Western romance, corrupt banker, blizzard survival, recipe book mystery, town hero, happy ending romance, period romance, authentic Western prairie romance. October brought the first hard frost and the smell of wood smoke from every chimney in town. Ben's practice grew busier as the weather turned cold, treating coughs and fevers and broken bones from falls on icy ground. He made house calls on horseback, his medical bag strapped behind the saddle, returning home each evening to find Ella waiting with supper warm and Hope asleep in her cradle. The rhythm of their days was predictable and comforting, built on small rituals that made them feel like a family. On a crisp morning in mid-October, Ben was in his office examining a farmhand's twisted ankle when Sheriff Cole walked in without knocking. His face was grim. "We have a problem, Doc. Stage from Pendleton was robbed last night. Driver said the man who did it matches the description of someone who used to work for Caldwell."
Caldwell is in prison.
"This man is not. Name is Wade Jessup. He was Caldwell's enforcer before the trial. Disappeared when things went south. Now he is back and causing trouble. Robbed the stage, shot the guard in the leg. Guard will live, but he is shaken up bad."
Where is the guard now?
"At the hotel. I need you to look at him."
I will get my bag.
Ben told Ella where he was going and promised to be back within the hour. She nodded and handed him his coat, her expression tight with worry.
Be careful.
Always am.
The guard was a young man named Tom, pale and sweating with a bullet wound in his left thigh. Ben cleaned and dressed the wound, gave him laudanum for the pain, and told him to stay off his feet for at least a week. Sheriff Cole stood nearby, arms crossed. Jessup took the payroll. $300. That was meant for the railroad crew working east of town. Without it, they will not get paid, and they will leave. Project will stall.
Why would Jessup care about the railroad?
He does not. He cares about revenge. He blames this town for what happened to Caldwell. Thinks if he causes enough trouble, he can make us suffer.
So what do we do?
I am putting together a posse. Jessup was spotted heading north toward the ridge country. If we move fast, we can catch him before he gets too far. I want you to come along in case someone gets hurt.
I am a doctor, not a gunfighter.
I know. But you are the only medical help we have. And if this turns into a fight, I need you there. Ben did not want to go. He had a wife and a baby daughter at home, and no desire to chase outlaws through the wilderness. But he also knew the sheriff was right. If someone got hurt and he was not there, it would be on his conscience. He agreed, went home to tell Ella, and found her standing in the kitchen with Hope on her hip.
I have to go with the sheriff. There is a man causing trouble, and they need me in case someone gets hurt.
How long will you be gone?
A day, maybe 2. I will be back as soon as I can.
I do not like this.
Neither do I. But it is the right thing to do.
Ella set Hope in her cradle and turned to face him fully, her arms crossed.
You are not a lawman, Ben. You are a doctor. Your job is to heal people, not chase criminals.
I know. But if someone gets shot, and I am not there, they could die. I cannot let that happen.
And what if you get shot? What happens to Hope and me then?
I will be careful. I promise.
You cannot promise that. You do not know what is going to happen out there.
Ella, I have to go. Cole needs me. The town needs me.
She stared at him for a long moment, anger and fear warring in her eyes. Finally, she nodded.
Fine. But you come back to me, Ben Sullivan. You come back safe.
I will.
He kissed her hard, then kissed Hope's forehead, and left before he could change his mind. The posse consisted of Sheriff Cole, Deputy Harris, Henry Marks, and 3 other men from town, all armed and mounted. They rode north at a steady pace, following the tracks Jessup had left in the soft dirt. The air was cold and sharp, the sky a clear pale blue. By midday they reached the ridge country, a series of rocky hills covered in scrub pine and juniper. The trail led up a narrow canyon, and Cole called a halt. Jessup could be anywhere up ahead. We need to move slow and stay sharp. Harris, you and Marks take the left side. Ben, you stay in the middle with me. Everyone else spread out and keep your eyes open. They moved forward cautiously, horses picking their way over loose stones. Ben's heart pounded in his chest. He had his rifle slung across his back, but he had no intention of using it unless absolutely necessary. His hands were made for healing, not killing. Halfway up the canyon, a shot rang out. The bullet struck a rock near Deputy Harris's horse, and the animal reared. Harris shouted and fought to stay in the saddle. Another shot followed, this one closer. Everyone down! Ben dismounted and crouched behind a boulder, his pulse racing. He could see Jessup now, perched on a ledge above them with a rifle in his hands. The man was lean and hard-eyed, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. You boys should have stayed home. Caldwell sends his regards. Sheriff Cole returned fire, the crack of his rifle echoing through the canyon. Jessup ducked and moved to a new position, firing again. One of the townsmen cried out and fell, clutching his shoulder. Ben did not think, just ran to the man's side and pulled him behind cover. The wound was bleeding, but not fatal. Ben tore a strip from his own shirt and pressed it against the injury.
Hold this. Press hard.
The man nodded, his face white with pain. Ben looked up and saw Henry Marks climbing the rocks on the left side, moving quietly toward Jessup's position. The old blacksmith was surprisingly agile for his size, his movements deliberate and controlled. Sheriff Cole kept Jessup's attention with steady gunfire, while Harris circled to the right. Ben stayed low, his focus on keeping the wounded man stable. Minutes stretched like hours. Then Henry Marks appeared behind Jessup and swung the butt of his rifle like a club. The blow caught Jessup across the back of the head, and the outlaw crumpled without a sound. Henry kicked the rifle away and motioned for the others to come up. By the time Ben reached the ledge, Jessup was unconscious, and Henry was binding his hands with rope. Sheriff Cole checked the man for weapons, then looked at Ben. "How is Foster?"
He will live. Bullet went through the shoulder, missed anything vital. Needs proper stitching, but I can do that when we get back to town.
Good. Let us get this bastard in chains and head home. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, Jessup tied to a tree and still unconscious. Ben cleaned and stitched Foster's wound by firelight, his hands steady despite his exhaustion. The man gritted his teeth, but did not cry out. When Ben finished, Foster thanked him and lay down to rest. Henry Marks sat across the fire, cleaning his rifle. "You did good today, Doc. Kept your head when it mattered."
I did not do much. Just tried not to get shot.
"That is more than some men can manage. You are braver than you think."
I do not feel brave. I feel scared.
That is what bravery is. Doing the right thing even when you are scared. Ben nodded and stared into the fire, thinking of Ella and Hope waiting at home. He missed them fiercely, missed the warmth of their house and the sound of Hope's soft breathing in the night. He had done what was needed, but he would be glad to get back. The next morning, they rode into Cottonwood with Jessup slung over his horse, awake now, but silent. A crowd gathered as they reached the sheriff's office, and Cole handed the prisoner over to his deputy with orders to lock him up and send a telegram to the marshal in Pendleton. Ben dismounted and looked around, searching for Ella. She was standing on the boardwalk outside the general store, Hope in her arms, her face tight with worry. When she saw him, relief flooded her eyes. He walked over and pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of the baby between them.
I am home. I am safe.
You better be.
She kissed him hard, then stepped back and looked him over for injuries.
Are you hurt?
No. A man named Foster took a bullet, but he will be fine. Everyone else is unhurt.
Good. Because if you had gotten yourself killed, I would have been very angry.
Noted.
They walked home together, and Ben told her everything that had happened. Ella listened in silence, her jaw tight. When he finished, she shook her head.
No more pauses. No more chasing outlaws. You are a doctor, Ben. Not a hero.
I know.
Promise me.
I promise.
And he meant it. He had done his duty, had helped when he was needed, but he had no desire to do it again. His place was here, in this town, with his family. The danger was over, and life could return to normal. By November, the days were short and cold, the prairie grass brown and brittle. Ben's practice kept him busy, and Ella spent her days caring for Hope and managing the household. The baby was growing fast, her eyes bright and curious, her smile quick and easy. She recognized her parents now and would reach for them when they came near, her tiny hands grasping at air. One afternoon, Jenny stopped by with news that she was expecting again, due in the spring. Ella congratulated her and felt a small pang of longing. She loved Hope fiercely, but the thought of another child was appealing. She mentioned it to Ben that night, and he smiled.
Whenever you are ready, I am ready.
Not yet, but maybe in a year or two.
Sounds perfect.
Thanksgiving came and the church hosted a community dinner. Tables were set up in the hall and every family brought food to share. Ben and Ella sat with Jenny and her husband, and Hope slept peacefully in a basket at their feet. The meal was simple but abundant: roasted turkey and mashed potatoes and pumpkin pie. Reverend Michaels said a prayer of thanks, and everyone bowed their heads. We give thanks for this harvest, for the safety of our town, for the families gathered here, and for the blessings we have received. May we continue to care for one another and build a community rooted in faith and kindness. Amen. The room echoed with amens, and the meal began. Ben looked around at the faces of his neighbors, people he had treated and helped and come to know. This was his home now. These were his people, and he was grateful for all of it. As winter settled in, Ben and Ella prepared for the cold months ahead. They stocked the pantry with canned goods and dried meat, chopped firewood, and stacked it high against the house. Ben made sure his medical supplies were well stocked, knowing that winter illnesses would keep him busy. Ella sewed warm clothes for Hope and mended their own coats and gloves. The first snow came in early December, a soft fall that covered the prairie in white. Hope stared out the window in wonder, her tiny hands pressed against the glass. Ben stood behind Ella, with his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder.
Our first winter as a family.
The first of many.
I like the sound of that.
They stood together in the warm glow of the lamplight, the world outside quiet and still, and knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. Strong and steady, building a life that was theirs alone.